Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're joining us to celebrate Rebecca Leighton, our 2020 Alumni Innovator Award winner. This year, in lieu of a live event, we're taking time for in-depth conversations with each of our awardees to talk career journeys, why they're passionate about public health, and how they exemplify our school's value of making health a human right. My name's Heidi Mastrud, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations at the School of Public Health. It's my privilege to work alongside our school's alumni and to witness their passion and commitment to improving health and well-being for people and populations all around the world. Before Dean John Finnegan and Rebecca dig into a rich conversation, there are just a few pieces of information to share. The School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota is situated on the ancestral land of the Dakota people. We acknowledge the ongoing debt that's owed to the Dakota people and strive to create healthy dialogue, relationships, and practices that address this injustice as well as others related to the Indigenous people of this state. As you'll see on screen, the University of Minnesota School of Public Health's experts bring clarity and scientific knowledge to a range of topics critical to understanding and managing the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact of racism on public health, and other issues of significance to the health and well-being of people and populations in Minnesota and far beyond. If you haven't taken time to explore recent research and news from SPH, I invite you to check out our website. Health in All Matters is a weekly podcast produced by the school to bring more understanding of public health challenges across the globe and close to home. Our premiere series focused on COVID-19. The second series of Health in All Matters launched on October 15th and focuses on racism and the many implications this destructive force has on the health and well-being of Black Americans. You'll be able to find new episodes on our website or through your favorite podcast streaming service. And today is Give to the Max Day, Minnesota's celebration of giving. And I encourage you to make a gift to two different causes. First, funds raised today for the School of Public Health will directly support a diverse, equitable, and inclusive experience for our students, including providing emergency funding and scholarships for students who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Second, Nutritious You Food Pantry is seeking support to provide fresh and healthy food to students that struggle to get enough to eat. Visit the URLs on screen to learn more about each of these campaigns. Finally, a few tips to begin. We'll have a few minutes for Q&A with Rebecca at the end of our time together. You're welcome to submit questions at any time. You can put them into the Q&A box. We'll get to as many as we have time for at the end of our time together. We'll be recording this webinar and we'll share it with you after the event. We encourage you to share it with others who might find it interesting. And finally, I hope that you'll take a moment to share a note of congratulations and celebration with Rebecca, either through the chat function here on Zoom or via Kudo board. I'll drop the link into the chat in just a few minutes for you to access at any time. And now let's get to it. For 75 years, our school has prepared some of the most influential leaders in the field and transformed the way public health is practiced around the globe. Our programs and research have evolved to meet current public health needs, but our focus and determination to protect and promote the health of all populations hasn't wavered since the school was founded in 1944. We've trained more than 12,000 students since our founding. This year's group of awardees represents the determination, collaboration, vision, and creativity that are hallmarks of our school's rich history. The 2020 Alumni Awardees were nominated and selected by a committee of their peers as exemplars of the commitment, bold vision, and fortitude we need in public health. We are incredibly proud to call these alumni our own. Today, we celebrate the Innovator Award. This award is given to an alum who's developed innovative ideas, approaches, or solutions to public health through science, practice, or education. Rebecca Leighton is this year's awardee. Rebecca is a health promotion specialist at Boynton Health at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where she focuses on addressing food and housing insecurity among college students, as well as nutrition and health promotion. She founded and oversees the Nutritious You Food Pantry, which provides fresh produce and staple foods to an average of 800 students every month at the U. She was nominated for this award by Martha Coventry with letters of support from professors Jamie Stang and Melissa Laska. Rebecca, we are so pleased to present you with this award. Hang tight while we queue up a video to introduce our audience to your work.
Graduated from the Coordinated Master's Program in Public Health Nutrition. So it's a program where you become a dietitian and get your master's in public health all within 2 years. Currently, I work as a health promotion specialist at Boynton Health, where I focus on college student health and more specifically on food insecurity among college students. I chose to go into public health because I was studying nutrition as an undergraduate and was going to become a dietitian. But through my experience learning about chronic diseases and health, I really realized that a lot of people, including college students, were struggling to put enough food on the table and just didn't really have enough money to even get enough to eat. Specifically at the University of Minnesota, about 1 in 5 students experience food insecurity. So that means that they struggle to pay for enough food to eat, or they actually run out of food and go hungry. The idea to start the Nutritious You Food Pantry came from a class project from the School of Public Health program. The intended impact of Nutritious You is twofold. It is to help students get enough food in the month that they visit, and then to help them reduce stress around accessing food. And then we add the extra layer of the campus gardens. It's unique that we grow some of our own food. We give out about 30,000 pounds of food in a school year, so that's just over 9 months, 3,000 plus unique students. And we partner with a food bank, and that's how we get our food at an extreme discount. So that led to a coalition that's been coming together that work to change the systems and policies at the university to make it easier for students. I think that where the food pantry has led has become actually the most innovative thing about it, and that we haven't stopped and we keep trying new things and growing. And if the School of Public Health taught me anything, it's that evaluation is key. So we evaluate everything, and last year we saw 87% of students say that they felt they got enough to eat in the month that they visited the food pantry, and 97% of students felt reduced stress around accessing food. And so we know that we're accomplishing what we set out to do.
Hey, Rebecca, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is terrific. You know, we have so much in common with Boynton because, you know, so many of our folks like yourself actually trained in the school, and it's wonderful to see how much that training is resulting in the kind of innovation that you're responsible for. Let's talk a little bit about how did you run across the problem of food insecurity among university students? And well, let's just talk about that. How did you run across that and then formulate the issues around it and the solution that led to the initiative that you have innovated in?
Yeah, like it mentioned in that video, it's really interesting about how the idea came about. It was through a class project while I was getting my master's degree in the School of Public Health. The class was called Community Nutrition Intervention, and you just had to come up with a nutrition intervention idea. And for most of the projects, it was theoretical, but of course it could be implemented if we felt like that would work. And so when I was digging into the data just to explore the issue of food insecurity to see if that was where I wanted to focus my project, when I realized that data, that 1 in 5 students on our campus were struggling to get enough to eat, then I knew that that was a project that I wanted to continue on beyond the class. It felt imperative and important to do to make sure that we opened up that food pantry and got the resource to students in need.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any patterns in the data? So you're talking about roughly 20% or so of students. Are we talking mainly undergraduate students, or does it include graduate students? And do you see any commonalities among people who are suffering from food insecurity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that 20% includes all undergraduate and graduate students on our specific campus of the Twin Cities. But when we disaggregate it, we do see higher rates of food insecurity for undergraduate students specifically. So it's closer to 24% of our undergraduate students experience food insecurity. And then especially when you disaggregate it by race, we see that food insecurity disproportionately affects students of color, students that are first generation, students from low income families. Which is really important to keep in mind when we're targeting our resources for those in need.
Mhm. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the pantry's been going for how long now?
3 years, we're in our 4th year.
Okay, so 4th year, and you're evaluating data all the way along the way, right?
Hmm.
So does this help with improving what you're doing? Do you gain a little bit more insight into it? Tell us a little bit about how that pantry is running now.
Yeah, things have been going great and get smoother and smoother every year. And then, of course, the pandemic happens right when we get in our groove. But that data that we evaluate with the food pantry, we really evaluate how it's running, if we're meeting students' needs, like the video mentioned, if we're helping them get enough to eat and to reduce their stress. But we also know that the food pantry is not going to end food insecurity. So we keep that in mind with this initiative when we're thinking of other ways to address the root causes of food insecurity.
Okay, and let me remind our audience today that you can ask questions of your own in the Q&A box. So please feel free to do that as we go along here. So I'm pretty sure that this is not just a challenge or a problem of the University of Minnesota. Do we have any knowledge of food insecurity among college students in the rest of the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. So food insecurity, yeah, this is not just a U of M issue. This is happening nationwide, and it's an issue that's probably been around for a while, but has been really uncovered in the last 5 to 10 years. So from a study actually from one of our own School of Public Health faculty researchers that reviewed lots of different studies and data, found that nearly 1 in 3 college students nationwide might be experiencing food insecurity. So it really varies at what institution you're looking at. 2-year versus 4-year schools have different rates. Where in the country, we know cost of living is different in different areas. So that number's kind of a moving target, but students across the nation are really struggling to get enough to eat. Another way that we've seen the need grow is when you look at how many campuses have food pantries. So right now, over 700 colleges and universities across the nation have food pantries, which is just one way to show that colleges are recognizing that that's a problem and something that they hope to address.
This may be a tough question to answer, but thinking for a moment about the issue of a food pantry, in some ways, you could look at the food pantry as addressing a very specific sort of problem. But is there some kind of a larger policy issue here with respect to, food insecurity that state government or federal government could be able to address?
Yeah, I think you're really hitting the nail on the head, and that's when you know you're talking to someone in public health. We know that the issue isn't just as simple as a student can't find food. That would be a really easy problem to solve, to just put food in front of students, but it is much more complex than that. We know that there are systems and policies at play, exactly like you said, that are contributing to this issue, and a lot of it does have to do. I mean, there's a myriad of things, but I'd say one of the biggest ones is the cost of college, and not just tuition when we talk about the cost of college, but living. So your housing, which is important, and your food, which we know is important, and health insurance if students need that. So all of those things are really burdensome. So I think I've shared this data in many other presentations that the cost of tuition since 1970 has nearly has doubled in that time, has gone up dramatically, and Minnesota per capita income has not kept pace. So so students are really having a greater burden trying to pay for college and meet their basic needs, and financial aid has not kept up, and state investment in higher education has just gone down over time. So there's a lot of these contributing factors that are making it much more difficult for students to make ends meet today.
So it's interesting to me because that's really a set of policies in one way, shape, or form, or decisions that people have made that have caused a cascade effect, essentially, that leads those students that are more students of color than white students, that are students first generation and so forth, to end up experiencing the results of that in terms of food insecurity.
Exactly.
I'm sure that you would like to put yourself out of business at some point if we were able to change the public policies around that.
That is the phrase, yes.
So I've got a couple questions here. Trisha Alexander, whom I think you probably know, she says, ask this question: what are some sustainable resources you think would be beneficial in supporting college students' food access long-term? Question one. Question two, what are some barriers to implementing these sustainable resources?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. There's a lot of different things like we talked about. There's so many different ways that you could address the issue. One resource that's been on my mind a lot that I've done a lot of work with over the past year is SNAP benefits, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly called food stamps. And I mean, right now that's our current safety net program, and that's not going farthest upstream, but it's definitely something that's a step ahead from a food pantry, because it puts money in the hands of students so that they could purchase the food that they prefer. And we know that does work. When students get those benefits, it stabilizes their food supply, it reduces their stress, it allows them to focus on school, on completing that degree, and getting that higher education that we know is a social determinant of health. Some barriers to that. So college students are eligible for SNAP benefits, but it's difficult for them to get them. There's a lot of kind of hoops that they have to jump through. So they have to meet some certain exemption criteria in order to get those benefits. So they have to work.
That's one set of policies that could be shifted here.
Yeah, exactly. So if that was there's a lot of changes that could be made, various changes that could be made, more exemptions that could be added, or just allowing students to count their class requirements as those work hours that they're supposed to meet, because being a student is a full-time job. I'm sure the student, Trisha, who wrote that question, feels that it's a full-time job or more to be a student. So yeah. I think there's a lot that could be done with that, and there's a lot of movement on it, which is really great. So we just keep advocating for those changes.
Okay, so that's one thing I'm very interested in. We're coming up with the new legislative session in Minnesota starting in January. We still have split government, essentially. We have a House that's largely DFL, and we have a Republican House or Republican Senate by 1 or 2 votes. Has the state legislature ever dealt with this as a policy issue before?
I think it's been brought to their attention more recently. There's definitely some higher education advocacy groups that have been bringing it up specifically in Minnesota over just the last few sessions. The Hunger-Free Campus Act was passed in the last session, or without appropriations, but it kind of is starting to bring the issue of awareness around college food insecurity.
But no money, no mission, right?
Exactly. So then that's the next step. So now we're starting to recognize it's a problem. Now, how do we get money behind it? So I think that this year, hopefully, we could see more on it, and in the future, more targeted policy decisions, either related to food or, like we said before, tuition. So maybe that reinvestment from the state in higher ed, or different thoughts around allocating financial aid, or offering more financial aid, or targeting it to those students that we talked about that might be disproportionately affected. So there's other things that can be done that's not specifically related to food, but would free up the students' money for food.
Could you talk a little bit about the impact on students, those that have food insecurity? It would seem to me that cascading effect would hit them in a whole variety of different ways. Can you give me some ideas about that?
Yeah. From students that I've spoken with, so many different, like you said, cascading effects that can happen. I think the biggest one is the just chronic worry and stress, and how we know that affects our health long term. So just wondering where your next meal will be coming from is so stressful. I had students, when I interviewed them, talking about trying to focus on their academics, but also trying to plan their eating schedule for the next week, knowing they have $25. How are they going to stretch that until they get paid next? Having to decide between paying for medication and paying for food. Or we have student parents, so trying to put food on the table for their children, cutting meals for themselves so that they can get their degree. So the stress, the worry, the physical aspect too, students talking about their stomach growling in class and not being able to go to social activities because they can't afford to eat with their friends. And a lot of students mentioned that they would go to free activities around campus that would have food that would help fill those gaps in their diet. And so we've seen a lot with COVID-19 that is really impacting them because there's less events on campus and less free food for them to access. So that's just one of the many ways that COVID is impacting their ability to get food.
Yeah, and schools, a lot of schools and colleges within the university, I'm aware that they have emergency funds.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any sense, do those emergency funds help with this challenge as well?
Yeah, I think that's another, I mean, that's kind of our own safety net version, that we have our own kind of social service that we can provide. And from what I hear from students, those funds really do make the ends meet. We hear a lot of students who report that they don't have enough money to cover a $500 unexpected expense. And you can imagine how easily that can come up if you have a car breakdown or a sick child or anything like that. Your hours cut at work, because we know students' jobs are not stable. So a lot of times it really is just kind of that gap funding that they need. They need a couple $100s for that repair or $1,000 to make rent until their job hours stabilize. So we know that emergency funds are really immensely helpful for students. And again, once we just keep them in school instead of dropping out, because if they drop out and they have any amount of debt, that's going to be so much more detrimental than if they finish their degree with a similar amount of debt.
And, with the data that you collect, and this is a question that has been asked here, what do we know about how nutritious you changes the quality of nutrition that students receive? In watching the video, for example, I mean, you're out there farming, you're growing stuff, so do you have any feedback from students as far as yes, there's the basic issue of the food insecurity piece, but it looks to me like you're doing some really good things nutritionally.
Yeah, and with my background in nutrition and dietetics, I just couldn't put it past me just to only provide food. So we had to try to get the foods that were difficult for students to access, which tend to be the foods that we would want to promote among
Fresh
students.
vegetables.
Yeah. Fresh vegetables, fruit. I mean, you probably experience it too. It sometimes feels more expensive and more difficult to buy. So if you're a person with a low income and you need to feed yourself or your family for the week or the month, those low nutrient dense foods like a bag of chips would get you, a $2 bag of chips gets you a lot farther than $2 worth of raspberries at the grocery store. So it's not really a decision that they want to be making, but sometimes that's just the way that things shake out. So when I remember speaking to one student, and he said that he never shopped at what he said was the healthy section of the grocery store. I would argue that all of the foods in the grocery store have a way to fit in your diet, but he never shopped in the produce section because it was too expensive. And he had never had a sweet potato before, but we offered it at the food pantry. So he said he was going to take it home and take one of our recipes that we provide and try it, because the stakes are so low when you don't have to go out on a limb and spend a couple dollars on an item you've never seen before. So I know that it's definitely introduced students to new foods, which is really nice to hear.
Yeah. A question from one of our members of the audience here. How does housing security influence food insecurity on college campuses? Again, another cascading effect, perhaps?
Yes, yeah. I think in my bio you heard that we mentioned food and housing insecurity because it's so hard to tease the two apart. They're so interrelated. They kind of fall under this category that we call basic needs. So we've known that that's an issue, and it really came to the forefront spring of 2019. My colleague and I were doing focus groups around housing and the high cost of housing. And I mean, students just said it point blank. They said, next to tuition, housing is your next biggest expense. One student said, if you don't pay your rent, you don't have a roof over your head. So they described how they can choose to go hungry, or they can skip their meals and deal with the physical and emotional mental consequences of hunger, but you really can't live in Minnesota without a roof over your head, and students can't really live in homeless shelters or short-term housing that's not really meant for them. So if we can address the high cost of housing and save, it saves students money. It's more money in their pocket that they can spend, therefore, on food and their other basic needs.
So this is yet another policy root cause issue here in terms of really getting to the nubbin of what the causes are here.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of ways when you broaden the understanding of food insecurity as more of a financial issue, it does actually open up a panacea of a lot more policy and systems changes that could be suggested to address the problem at its root cause, and in a more broad sense than just opening up food pantries or providing emergency funds just for food.
Yeah. There's a few things here that you ought to know about. Steve Waldorf says, thank you, Rebecca, for your unwavering commitment to students and raising attention towards their nutritional needs. The work you're addressing is impactful. Stay strong and continue advocating for others. So a little congratulations there. But that brings me to another set of questions, which really has to do about your career since you have received your degree in public health. And given the things that you learned in your program, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about some of the key people who really helped shape your public health career. Talk to us a little bit about the influence of the program and some of these folks and the trajectory that you're taking in your career.
Yeah. Well, I was originally hired to run a food pantry and a garden that supported that food pantry. But that did quickly evolve because of my training in public health. And I think also because of the department that I'm in at Boynton Health, the health promotion department. So we really use a public health approach when we try to address any sort of issue. And so food insecurity is no exception. So that has allowed me to really exercise and use my public health skills through things like leading coalitions on campus that are working to do what we were just talking about, address the systems that drive this inequitable access to resources and help ensure that students' basic needs are met. Working with stakeholders and really trying to just think upstream and think as preventively as possible to help address those basic needs through those systems changes. So that's how my background in public health has led to where my career is going and how my position has changed since I've started. And some really influential people from the School of Public Health that helped me, I would say, were my advisor, Melissa Laska, who I still get to work with now as a staff person at the U. So that's really exciting. And then my program directors, Jamie Stang and Aida Miles, they provided more than just, education through the classroom, but resources and encouragement and mentorship and connections to these networks that really opens up so much more opportunity than just the classroom.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned Melissa and Jamie, because we have yet another video, and I'm going to ask our tech folk to make it happen.
Hi, Rebecca. I'm so glad to see that you're receiving the Alumni Innovator Award. The work you do every day impacts thousands of students. I remember the first time we met when you were applying for the MPH program. Every once in a while, you get to meet a prospective student that you just can tell has passion for the field and commitment. And you were one of those students. Thanks for making a difference.
Congratulations on this award. We are so proud of you and all the work that you've done around food insecurity, particularly among college students. You've helped so many university students, both here at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus and well beyond that. I really feel very thankful for the amount that I get to still work with you to this day, even now that you're no longer our student. And I really look forward to all the exciting things to come from your career as you move on. Congratulations.
And we didn't pay them to say that, Rebecca.
Good. Thank you.
There's so many wonderful messages here of support for the work that you do, and congratulations as well. So let me ask you a little bit more about your professional direction. Where do you see yourself moving in the next 5-10 years or so? Or do you think out forward?
Well, I'm still so early in my career, so I feel like I'm still learning, and that's a great place to be as well. But I think when we think about the issue of college food insecurity, what I hope in 10 years, a dream would be that it doesn't exist, like you just said, that we'd put ourselves out of business in relation to, in regards to the food pantry and other emergency food resources. I would really like to see those issues not be needed. Success would mean that students would have their basic needs met and would not need to rely on those emergency resources. I say that, but of course I know that then there would be other issues to look to. So I feel really lucky that I've been able to expand my scope and look a little bit into housing insecurity and higher education policy, financial aid, all of those other things that contribute to the root causes of food insecurity. So I hope to continue to explore those more upstream issue areas and learn how to affect real change at that level.
So what sort of advice would you have for students that are just starting to get into their public health program? You're another success story and an innovator on top of it. What advice would you give to incoming students in public health?
That's a really great question. I think I would tell students to really explore what they are passionate about, what they're interested in, what's calling to them. That's what I really loved about graduate school. It was much different than your undergrad when you're just trying to get through your degree. In grad school, we were really given the opportunity to explore those interests of ours. So I would say to go after those interests, and then I would probably say this, and I'm thinking of especially my boss, Dave Golden, who would laugh at this, of be persistent, because I know that's the running joke in our office. But if you really do have an idea or a passion or an issue that you care about, being persistent and making sure that issue is heard and addressed, and never giving up when you are met with resistance.
And David is another alum of our school, and I remember working with David back in the days of the old Minnesota Heart Health Program, going way back. I won't tell you how many years that was, but it was a couple ago. One of the things that our viewers might benefit from is, I know that if you go on the Boynton website, that they can actually see the pantry.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fairly large website. How many people would you say are currently involved in the pantry, both people that are working to keep it operational and organized, and people that are using the pantry? And I assume many of them also help to keep the pantry going.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, it was a student-led initiative when I was a graduate student. And although I'm a staff that advises it now, and I do a lot of the behind the scenes work, it still really has a strong influence from students. So we have what we call a leadership team, but it's about 20 dedicated students that are committed to helping implement the food pantry every single month, when it used to be monthly, but twice a month now, as we've increased our frequency with COVID. So the students really are the face of it and do a lot of work and continue to help it run and operate. And then you're exactly right. A lot of students visit the food pantry, and then that's how they get involved with helping become on our leadership team and become volunteers. I think that a big misconception is that you say free food and students will show up and rob you blind and then leave. But students really feel committed to giving something back, whether it's donating their time and energy or money or whatever they feel they can give. They really do genuinely want to do that. So we have a lot of participants that help volunteer. And then as far as participants, like we said, when we were open once a month, it'd be an average of 800 students. Sometimes, I know our busiest month, we had 1,200 students come in 3 days. So it can be very busy. Yeah. Things look a little different right now when campus census is a little bit lower, because thankfully some students are choosing to stay home and study at home and maybe getting their needs met there. But yeah, they keep us busy every time.
Well, that's terrific, and I just wish you all the success in the food pantry. And I agree with you. I hope that policy changes down the road might put you out of business. We won't have to deal with these kinds of things. But until that happens, you also have made this a community effort. And that's the other thing about public health, is that all public health is to some degree local. Mm-hmm. And building that kind of community, both of the people who use the pantry as well as people who are there to dedicate their time to it, that creates a really wonderful integrated network. And it's the way we work in public health. Mm-hmm. So any last things that you would want your audience to know before we hand things back to Heidi?
Well, thank you for attending, and that I feel very supported by the School of Public Health and the students that help run the daily in and outs of the food pantry, and my colleague and my team at Boynton. So I'm really honored for this award. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for this opportunity.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Rebecca, congratulations. Speaking on behalf of the Alumni Society, we're just so proud of you. Your dedication to this work is incredible and admirable. So I just want to remind folks one more time, if you want to make a gift in honor of Rebecca's award, or simply to support the great work of Nutritious You or the school, so we can continue to educate our future change makers like Rebecca, please visit these links on screen. We'll leave them up for a few minutes. Thanks to all of you for joining us today to celebrate Rebecca's award. And I hope you stay safe and healthy, and that we'll see you again soon.